Devil, my friend. Fashion. Things to wear. Possibly faces covered, but more importantly, covering up the bodies. Merch. We have that now. We are very, very excited to announce that Vampire and the Devil have partnered with our friends at Rockin' Horror Apparel. They are now taking care of the actual merch, the exclusive merch for the Vampire and Devil podcast, modeled by our very sexy devil right here.
Oh, yeah.
But we have all kinds of goodies to share with you.
Got the hoodies, we got some shirts, we got some tanks coming up, we got some booty shorts, we got all the stuff you want to wear from the Vampire and Devil podcast, thanks to Rockin' Horror.
Horns up, fangs out. Devil, I pose a question to you. As Fangs and Infernos, I pose a curiosity to you because you guys put me and Devil in this position. It wasn't that long ago, my dearest Devil, that we had a conversation about erotic horror and what was considered, strangely enough, the gold standard of like erotic horror, a movie that you and I didn't score particularly high. The funny thing is, this movie that we're about to discuss is definitely in that same vein, definitely that same type of pulse. But I will say, I feel that we'll be still a little bit more positive when it comes to this movie because it was a good time. It was fun, definitely bizarre. But hey, what can I say there, Devil? The Fangs and Infernos wanted us to talk about it. They voted it as we talk about the letter V. V as in victory. But just because I feel like they did it for me, V is in vampire. So let's talk about vampires or vampires as voted on by our beloved Fangs and Infernos, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, I remember seeing this movie before at one point, but I don't think it was on my radar as much as, when we talked about Vampire Lesbos. I mean, like you said, I mean, it's a movie that whenever you think about erotic, horror, especially erotic vampire horror, it's one of those ones that just go on the forefront. And yeah, and like you said, when we watched it, it's like, really, this is considered the forefront of it. And not to get into big of it, but I mean, like the most part of this movie, I mean, yeah, this movie's not, I'm not going to say this is like, the best movie in the entire world either, but
No,
to me, I feel like this was still a better movie than Vampire Lesbos.
100%.
So it's weird. It's like, because that's the one you think of, when you think of that kind of stuff. But yeah, this one, has it all too. I mean, it's got, I mean, you got the questionable. I mean, we're gonna get into meat and potatoes of it, but it's got like like with Vampire Lesbos, we're talking about them out in the sun. There's some questionable scenes with them out in the sun in this movie too. A little bit done a little bit better instead of
Yeah,
just sitting there tanning and shit like that. They're at least trying to hide from the sun in the trees and
still
things
not
like
over that.
that. But you know what I mean, a little bit more, of that. But I still liked, it definitely was very traditional, like the Vampire Lesbos. They didn't have the typical vampire teeth that you see, in the fangs in the movie. It was definitely a different way. They were using, glass and knives and stuff like that to make the original, blood cut and stuff like that, which is, just like Vampire Lesbos. And then this one, there's definitely there's some love scenes between two females. So there's definitely some lesbo scenes in this. So I mean, you can kind of say that vampires. I'm not sure which one came first, but I would definitely think that this movie was maybe after Vampire Lesbos in
Yeah.
this. I would hope, just because they're like, okay, we're gonna take that idea and make it a little bit better. Because if this movie was first, then Vampire Lesbos really dropped the ball then, because they already had a movie that was predecessed already before. But like I said, I'm not exactly sure which one of these came out first. But anyway, like I said, it's, I mean, what's not to love? You got you got, vampires and women, and you got them naked throughout the whole entire movie. You've got, one that was potentially a playboy kind of, nude model that's done stuff. One that eventually becomes into that, it goes into that, the scene and stuff like that. So, let's talk about some vampires with the weird Y spelling in it.
I know.
Vampires, I don't know how you're supposed to say it. Vampires, vampires.
It's more a British thing. Like
Yeah,
it's still pronounced vampires, but like sometimes Britain just wants to be different, like the way they spell theater with R-E as opposed to E-R. Sometimes the Brits just want to be different because this movie is a combination of like it's literally like casted and directed as kind of a hybrid, British and Spanish like crew that like is putting all this together. But yeah, for what it's worth, Devil, this movie came out after Vampiros
okay.
Lesbos. Vampiros Lesbos was 71, this is 74, so they definitely improved on it. Um, it's kind of interesting when it comes to it just kind of overall because it's got that same type of feel. It's based in eroticism. It's based around kind of like softcore porn to a certain degree. It's just kind of the way that it was done. The director of this movie, he's known to have that kind of style, kind of like how Dario has his style, Stanley has his style, so on and so forth. This director's no different. It's like he's got his style when it comes to like doing these type of movies. But yeah, Anolka, who is a former Playboy playmate and actually courtesy of the Vampire's good friend Phil, who was doing some security for Anolka. I actually have a 8x10, signed to me from Anolka for this movie. So that's actually pretty cool. But yeah, it's that same kind of interesting thing. I will say the one thing that's kind of interesting about this movie, Devil, just like you already, precursor for, is like it's that same lack of fangs, which is okay. And what I mean by that is like, yeah, everybody knows that I'm a lunatic for vampiric lore. So again, with the daylight thing, I don't love it because I'm so hardcore about that and I'm such a stickler for vampiric lore. But as opposed to vampiros, they're not sunbathing out while trying to or claiming to be this creature. Like that's just insane to me that nobody would have realized this is kind of probably not something we should do in this movie. But that's neither here nor there. Overall, this movie's got kind of an interesting design, but yeah, it's based off the blood being taken out of the people by cuts, knives, things like that, which gave me a little bit of like kind of an interesting, kind of warm little fuzzy feeling because also like already, but also we've got Fangs and Infernos that know this as well. I'm very fond of Martin. It's my favorite George Romero movie that he ever did. It's, actually George's favorite movie that he ever did. He had put that out there, as the Fangs in Inferno. Remember our George Romero episode? Yes, I did put it number two, but I just felt that there was value and importance in understanding what he started in the zombie world with Night of the Living Dead. But yes, my overall favorite movie that he ever did is Martin, where this guy, basically who's a wannabe vampire, draws blood from his victims with a razor blade. So there was a part of that I enjoyed, that nostalgia feeling watching this movie, thinking about another movie that was pretty cool. But overall, it's just kind of this very kind of interesting design of this movie where you've got these two female, vampires who are like, you know, taking unsuspecting motorists and feeding on them while doing activities. But it's kind of this interesting, bizarre dynamic of like, well, they're friends, but then this guy kind of sort of gets in between them where one of them hooks up with them and it kind of pisses the other person off. And then they have sort of this rift is generated, but she still gets a piece of him as well, and she still gets a little bit of deep dicking of her own, and there was just kind of this overall weird dynamic of it, and it's just kind of a unique thing. But like we've discussed many times, where we've talked to V&D alumni, Brandy Roderick about it, is how much the devil loves his sin and skin. But I gotta tell you, my friend, they whacked some of your sin and skin within seconds of this movie.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I said, yeah, I mean, that's probably, I'm gonna say probably, which is gonna be weird for me to say that the Sin and Skin is probably my second favorite part of this movie, and you're gonna go like, what the hell? What the hell, devil? What are you talking about? Let me precursor why. The first thing that I love about this movie, and if the Fangs Infernos that maybe have seen this movie or haven't seen this movie, that the castle that they're filming in and inside is Rocky Horror Picture Show. And you just
Yes.
see the staircase and some of the whole entire time I keep on singing all the songs, waiting for Magenta to come out and go, start singing, like, let's do the time warp again. So I mean I loved it. I loved looking at it. I'd like to look to see if there was a clock in the corner. Yeah, you do see a clock eventually at one point. I'm like, ooh, I wonder if that's the same clock that's actually in the Rocky Horror. Because I mean, there are that castle had been used for a lot of films and especially a
Do
lot of
things,
Hammer
yeah.
Time films and stuff like that. So it had been used, but it's like it's cool to see that this, in this movie, what actually precursors Rocky Horror. So they filmed this movie before they filmed Rocky Horror in that castle. But yeah, I mean, so that's going to be my number one thing. Now you're going to go into the number two reason why I like this movie. Yes. Yeah, I mean, you bang right in at the very beginning. I mean, it's just nudity straight up, right up in the beginning. And the one thing that I will say that I kind of disappointing a little bit is the fact that this movie is a 70s movie and the two main chicks, you see them naked throughout the whole entire movie, but they lack any bush, which was kind of weird for a
I
70s movie.
know.
I
I
was
know.
like,
Seriously,
I don't know whether or
the
not,
devil is a bushman.
yeah, and I don't know whether or not it was like, maybe they had bush, but not a huge hairy bush or something like that, or it was just the angles, and they're like, okay, we can get away with some sex, but we can't show so much bush because if we show too much bush, maybe we get into the non-rated instead of being R-rated. So it could be just
Or
the angles of
X-rated.
why, the reason why in the beginning and throughout the movie you really don't, you see these girls naked in showers and they're doing stuff and they're having sex with the guys and stuff like that, but there's never, you don't see any bush, which was, like I said, for being a 70s film. I mean, that's so weird until the, the characters of the campers, that was really weird. These people were camping in an RV right off the property line, which may be still on their property. I don't even know why. They're just really, and they can look out their window and see inside this castle and, inside the property, and it's like weird. Yeah, you don't get any bush until you see her. All of a sudden, she comes out, and her maid start having sex, and you're like, you see her character whole time, and you're like, okay, and then you see her naked, and you're like, Jesus, where do those big Mongo jongos come out of nowhere? Like in the shirt that she's wearing, you're not expecting it. But yeah, we see full bush from her. But the other point that I'm going to say when getting into the Sin and Skin that gives this a high rating in the erotica and that, and even like soft, like you said, the soft core porn, even the porn, man, there's reverse cowgirl in this, and you do not see reverse cowgirl very often in movies. Even like any kind of movie where people, actors are having sex or what like that, it's usually, guy on top, maybe girl on top, maybe a little bit of doggy or something like that. You don't see too many reverse cowgirl scenes in film. So I definitely give that, super kudos. Like I said, other than straight up porn, you never really see like actors having sex in that position. So yeah, I gotta give three thumbs up on that one.
Absolutely. No, absolutely, devil for sure. But it was also kind of like it's interesting in that respect because you don't see it, just like you said. But then at the same time, I mean, you had like people like Ron Jeremy back at that time still making a name for himself and building up his career. And the only reason I bring something like that up is because while that was, kind of like influential and interesting to see in a movie, the kissing itself though was very awkward. Like it seemed like it was weird. Like, you mentioned it before, off air as like aggressive, which is totally accurate, but it also just not only aggressive but just awkward. Like it was just kind of very strange. Like it seemed, and I actually did, also like you, some research of my own, and like, you know, the love scenes and stuff like that in general were very like, awkward for Anolka. She had actually talked about that, like that this is like they were hard for it was hard for her, and people might think of like, they might look at somebody who's a Playboy playmate and be like, oh, that's bullshit. She's not talking about that. It's like, no, no, no. It's like just because you're posing nude for photos has nothing necessarily to do with any kind of experience that could happen with filming a love scene kind of a thing. So like, but I've always found it to be like it was always a very bizarre type thing. Like
Yeah.
I'd seen vampires maybe twice before this. Just very, very casually. And it also does have a remake, a very recent remake, actually, a remake that came out, I think, about 10 years ago. Um, and I want to say I think I've seen that once, but I don't 100% remember. That might have just been more of a purchase for the sake of having the remake to go with the original on my shelf. So maybe somewhere down the line I'll have to revisit that. Not necessarily for a better remake, because I don't know, man. I have a hard time believing that that might be a better remake per se, because especially with times changing, considering this movie's like the current movie is a 2010s version and this is 40 years before. It's a completely different dynamic when it comes to that. So who knows? Maybe we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but I don't want to get too off track with that. But also, when it comes to like, you can also tell too that certain designs of horror, especially vampiric horror, if you're not, I don't mean one of us as in one of me. I mean one of us as in just familiar with the genre, like you are, can make a very, very interesting but also very strange execution of certain scenes, because there's parts of this movie that are incredibly bizarre, like things that you would assume you would have to notice that are just kind of getting bypassed and kind of ignored. But also, we make fun constantly of like movies, and even something like Scary Movie, where, shout out to V&D alumni, Lachlan Monroe, is like they poke fun at things like when a victim is running awkwardly from a slasher. Like, why do they go there? Why do they go this? But for the record, Devil, who the fuck goes into a basement first?
Yeah, yeah, and then the crazy thing about it, yeah, you're going into the basement, and that's the one thing I like about this movie. Or I feel weird about it, like with the vampiric lore and stuff like that,
But it's
which are kind
fun.
of understood. So depending on where you're going with the lore, I never understood the whole coffin thing. You know what I mean? Like to a point, unless you're going to that lore where you have to sleep in a coffin because it's got to have the dirt from your homeland or something like Nosferatu-ish kind of feel. I understand that.
Fully protect from the sunlight.
Yeah, yeah. But to me, I'm like, yeah, you would think that, like, even on like a movie like Once Bitten with Jim Carrey, they're in a basement level. There's no windows or nothing. Why do you need to sleep in a coffin? You should be able to sleep in a bed in general. You know what I mean? And that's what this movie
Get some
kind of
better company.
does. Where it's like, yeah, these ladies are in this basement and they're just sleeping because it's a dark basement where they're at. There's no way that any light is ever going to come into this room, so it's a coffin itself, so it's like you don't really need, like I said. So I get to that point where it's like, I guess, but like I said, if you're going into the more the vampiric and the Nosferatu kind of lore, he's got to sleep in it because he's got to be part with the dirt and things like that. So I understand that. But yeah, when you're going off script of that stuff, like I said, like in Once Bitten, it's like, why are they all like saying goodnight and turning off the lights and going in their coffins when you don't really necessarily need to sleep in a coffin? You could sleep in a bed. Just make sure that it's a I mean, you got to make sure it's a better basement than Fright Night, because apparently Fright Night's basement was not, all the work that they did to fix that, that place, the clocks and making sure the things all, yeah, you put a little bit of like duct tape over the windows. I'm like, no, you would take those, the guy's got like a shit ton of money. Why wouldn't you just take those windows out and rebuild the walls? You know what I mean? Like that, so that you
I
don't have
lo-
a. So like I said, like so if you have
I
a
love that
basement,
movie so
yeah,
much, Devil, but that always drove me nuts.
yeah. So if you had a basement like that, I can understand being in a coffin because there's a possibility that someone coming in might be able to break the wall and there's like that. But like in this movie, yeah, that basement is like it's a freaking cellar. Obviously it's a dark lit basement. It's meant to be that way because obviously the wine that they're having throughout the whole entire movie, they keep drinking all the wine, which kind of reminded me a little bit of Lost Boys. I was like,
Yeah,
are they drinking wine or are they drinking, actual blood? Because they kind of poke at it a little bit where the guy was
hit
like the
that.
connoisseur where he knows where all the wine is and he can't figure out this brand. So it's like kind of like, okay, maybe they're not drinking wine, maybe they're actually drinking blood. But then I'm like, well, it's got to be some kind of wine in there because obviously they're getting pretty drunk and loopy throughout the movie. So
Yes. No, absolutely. And maybe that just adds to the dead skeleton neglect.
yeah. Yeah, the two dead guys that are in the basement that nobody just seems to notice or care about.
Seriously. Oh, it's so bizarre. But I mean, it just is what it is. It was a completely different culture. It was a completely different time. But I mean, overall, when it comes to the movie, like it's fun. Like the thing about this movie is like I feel like you can enjoy this movie as just kind of a literal, just casual enjoyment experience where Vampiros Lesbos was so much more of just nails on a chalkboard because there was so much wrong with a movie that was considered, and I say this with a grain of salt, but considered elite for the category that like just like when we had that episode, it wasn't going to be a flawless victory, but you almost kind of couldn't help but feel like it just should have been. But when it comes to erotic horror, there's so many holes in everybody's game when it comes to that kind of stuff that I just feel like nobody can I feel like to a certain degree nobody can fully get it right. Unless you've got Carolyn Williams in there, then you can probably get it right. But anyway, I mean, it was just kind of an interesting dynamic when it came to this movie, the way it was just kind of designed, the story it was telling, the whole like, no fangs, but drawing blood for cuts, like taking out motorists, the weird kind of like, rift that was, put in by like this guy that came in who's like, getting his rocks off with her and pissing off her, but then she gets a piece and now she's kind of cool, but then, and then there's this and there's that. But at the same time, you did finally get your bush, brother, when it came to like the late part of the movie. But I will say the one thing about the movie is it's that standard length, it's that standard design. But I don't know if you kind of felt this way. Maybe it was just kind of a me thing. But Devil, did you find that the end of this movie for a movie that was a very standard length, 90 minutes, maybe a touch less, did it give you a bit of a slow burn feel just when it came to like the last like part of that movie? Like it wrapped everything up about as proper as this movie's going to give you. But I don't know, brother. I just kind of felt like it had that slow burn feel to it, where for a movie that wasn't drawn out or long, literally, I don't know, man. I felt like it slowed down dramatically when it came to the end of that movie.
yeah, I mean a little bit. I think towards the end, it definitely that feel. And then like I said, the icing on the weird cake of this movie is the ending, man, where it's like, hey, what are you doing in this property? These people are trying to buy this property. It's just like, what the hell? Like, it was like some like freaking Monty Python sketch all of a sudden out of
It really
nowhere.
was.
It was just so weird. It was just like, okay, like, hey, you need to get off of this. Why are you here? Like,
Bring out your dead.
yeah, yeah, it was just such a weird ending. And then obviously, they, they're gonna find some crazy shit when they go and do that tour. I mean, I would have loved to seen that just to see like the credits going through these people going through this house and seeing all this crazy shit. Hopefully they find those skeletons in the basement so those guys can stop finally chilling in there. Making the wine go bad.
Exactly. Maybe skeletons in the basement as opposed to skeletons in your closet, devil. I don't know, man.
Yeah.
There's just definitely a lot of weirdness when it came to that. But yeah, no, like, and again, Jose Ramon Lares, because I wanted to circle back around when it came to the director, he's definitely got a style. He's got a series of movies, like a large series of movies under his belt. But I mean that more like even at this time, like he had a group of movies that he had definitely become known for when it come to that. But anyway, it's a cool movie. Look, it's a fun time, nothing more, really nothing less. And as we move towards the obituaries when it comes to this, I mean, yeah, the movie's definitely weird. It's a bizarre time. I mean, it's definitely a roller coaster feel to it. But at the same time, it's like, look, if you love that aesthetic, if you love pretty things and you like pretty women, you're going to enjoy this movie. If you're somebody like me that's very, very particular when it comes to vampiric lore, look, it's going to drive you batty. But that doesn't change the fact that the movie as a whole, it's not particularly bad. It's not particularly terrible. You can actually tell and get the feel that they made the effort. That's kind of my thing when it comes to movies, especially movies in my genre. But like, if I can tell and see that you're at least giving the effort, you might not hit a home run. If anything, it might still be a ground out. But like, if I can see that you're at least trying, you like the visual to be a certain way, you like the angles, you like the lighting, so on and so forth. There's certain things that I can let slide. And while I still expected these girls within the first 15 minutes of the movie to just burst into flames and the credits start rolling, of course I did when it comes to that's what I expect in certain movies with certain characters. It doesn't change the fact that like the way the movie's designed, there is a certain amount of disbelief that I understand that I have to expel when it comes to movies like this, especially movies when it comes to like eroticism. So I definitely understand that.
But that's
When it
the one
comes
thing. But before we get to the obituaries, that's
Yeah,
what I was going
bud,
to ask you too.
absolutely.
Adding on to it, because now you just reminded me about it too with the ending. That for the movie being called Vampires and them being vampires, are they really vampires? Because in the movie, it kind of shows them possibility as ghosts
Yeah,
because it talks about they find you find out that these two girls like in that very beginning was a true thing that these girls got killed in this castle so
yeah,
they're dead spirits. So are they ghosts or are they vampires? I don't know, that was kind of confusing too. I was like,
yeah.
I just remember that right now. I'm at the end, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, they were talking about them being killed in the very beginning and not turned into I was waiting for somebody to turn them or something like that. And I'm like, oh yeah, they're just basically spirits. So it's like, when did ghosts become vampires all of a sudden?
No, 100% devil. And that's the thing. It's like I said, it's part of that kind of suspend disbelief. But I mean, at the same time, the other thing that I rant and rave about a lot, and I'm not going to rant and rave on this particular, I don't need to get on my soapbox for it, but it is still worth addressing that while I support a director's vision, a writer's vision, actors and actresses getting into character, just like hundreds of years ago, brother, when you and I were back in school, you got to show your work. And that's my problem with a lot of movies like this, just like you addressed just now. If they weren't going to be turned after that, I would have liked some type of explanation of are they playing dead? How does this offing of what appears to be two, lesbian humans suddenly turn into vampires roaming the countryside, offing motorists? It's just stuff like that. It's simply a matter of like, show your work. Look, you don't have to go into like huge detail if you don't want to. It doesn't have to be long division, but I feel like you owe it to me. I feel like you owe it to the people watching your movie to at least not leave them with overly too many questions. A lot of movies still leave you with questions. That's kind of what makes films so great. But at the same time, try to keep the questions to a minimum because you and I get into a lot of conversations as well about sequels. Do we want a sequel? Should there be a sequel? Would we hate to see a sequel? So on and so forth. So that's just kind of the way it is. When it comes to this movie and the obituaries, Devil, I mean, I like it just fine. I'm still going to give it a low rating because I feel like a low rating is just kind of the way it has to be for the design of this movie. I give it a 5.5. I like the movie still. In my heart, as a general enjoyment, I do feel it a little higher in me, but that doesn't translate to what I think the common populace, the Fangs and Infernos, would still take away from this movie. So I like it simple enough as an enjoyable time, but still a 5.5.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I'm gonna, like I said, because I don't 100% remember how low we did Vampire Lesbos,
It was down there. I
but
kind of want to say it was in the ballpark of a 3.5,
yeah, probably
maybe
to
a
like a
4.
4 or to a 5. But yeah, that's what I was thinking. But in general, like I said, yeah, I think in general I would probably give this exactly where you give it a 5.5. But I want to bump it up just a tad more to a 6, mainly for the two reasons: the reverse cowgirl and the fact that you got the Rocky Horror Picture Show castle. Even though, like I said,
One.
this movie precedes, is before the Rocky Horror Picture Show, but seeing this obviously after watching Rocky Horror Picture Show as much as we have, it was cool just to see the areas of the house that they go in, and you're like, "Ooh, that's where this was. That's where that is. That's where Rocky came down to the lab and seen what's on the slab."
Absolutely.
All that good stuff. Like I said, so it was just fun the whole entire time. I'm waiting for somebody to go, Rocky, Brad, Scott. I was waiting to see
Oh,
waiting to see.
Rocky.
I was waiting to see everything. I was like hoping they'd go into the room where all the Transylvanians were dancing. I'm like, man, I wish they would explore a little bit more of the house throughout the whole film. But yeah, I mean, so like, cause to me, like, yeah, I think 5.5 is probably good for that. But like I said, I'll bump it up just because. I mean, I'm not gonna bump it up because of the skin and stuff like that. I think that's where it is. But I think, like I said, the fact that you've seen in a non-porno, reverse cowgirl, which is very, very rare, and like I said, adding the Rocky Horror Picture Show castle, I got to give it a 6.
Works for me, Devil. I'm down, bro. Because you, just like you, we love Rocky Horror Picture Show. Shout out to Tim Curry, who both of us have been very, very fortunate to get to meet. So we love our Rocky Horror Picture Show. So absolutely, for sure, let's do it, brother. 6.0. That's the way we're gonna do with Vampires from 1974. Vampires for those who want to be purists when it comes to British,
Vampires,
when it comes
Vampires.
to, to British vampires, when it comes to purists, when it comes to British pronunciation. But that's the way it's going to be there, Fangs and Infernos. That is forever how it shall remain. 6.0 for Vampires from 1974 when it comes to the film that you guys voted for Alphabets of Horror, letter V. V is in victory, V is in vampires or
B
vampires,
as in vaginas.
and vias and vaginas so that the devil will always get his sin and his skin. Thank you so much, Fangs and Infernos. We always appreciate you guys. But don't forget, of course, if you want to look ever so vampiric, ever so devilish, please make sure that you're supporting Mark and Lizzie over at rockandhorror.com under Vampire and Devil Collab for all of the merch that they take care of for us for the Vampire and Devil podcast. It is getting into that spooky season. Of course, we're being rocked by the devil right there. Make sure that you're supporting our buddy Chris over at the Buffalo Bill House over in Perryopolis, Pennsylvania. It's absolutely awesome. It's an amazing stay. Devil and I went and experienced it firsthand along with Mrs. Vampire and Mrs. Devil. We all had an incredibly great time. Make sure that you're supporting independent museums like our friend John, who owns the Salem Witchboard Museum, as well as the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore. It's an amazing, great time. Really, really cool stuff. And of course, we always like to give a shout out to those who like it hot, just like the devil with Coney Island Saucery. We love our brother Aaron for everything that he does. Amazing flavors, stuff that he's done, with the Trailer Park Boys, but a hot, 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 hot sauce that he does officially licensed with the band Slayer. So definitely check
There.
those guys out, Slayer, and make sure that you're using that Vampire and Devil code so that way you get a nice discount on your purchase. But we appreciate you guys, and we will see you again soon. Again, 6.0 for Vampires 1974, as spoken by the devil and confirmed by Vampire. We'll see you guys real soon. Horns up, fangs out.
What's up? It's the devil here, and we're here to talk about more devil in movies. This time we're gonna talk about a little rock and roll movie. You might have heard of it, called American Satan. Have you seen this movie? Oh yeah, it's got it all. It's got rock and roll, sex, drugs, the devil. Ooh, who was played by Malcolm McDowell. Oh yeah, Mr. Clockwork Orange himself. Anyway, it's a cool movie. It's got Black Veil Bride's lead singer. Ooh, Andy. He's so dreamy. Anyway, it's a cool rock and roll movie. Your typical, sell your soul to the devil. You can't sell your soul to me, because I don't fucking want it. Anyway, you could go check out this movie, because if you haven't, maybe the devil might make a deal with you and take more than your soul. Go and check it out. American Satan!
Devil, my friend, I think it's time that we spill the tea. Brutalities. Vampire and Devil podcast couldn't be more excited, more humbled to let you all know that we have partnered with very dear friends of ours for a long time in Brutalities. And there's so much great stuff, so many flavors, so much to enjoy, and we're going to talk to you a little bit about it. Isn't that right there, my friend?
Oh yeah, we like it hot. Of course the Inferno likes it hot. Do you like the hot tea? Well, you might as well get some brutality. Yeah, horror movies, puns, rock and roll, brutality's got it all.
Absolutely. When it comes to the vampire, you know that he's going to absolutely gravitate towards that Nosferatu or that Nosferatu brew. Absolutely a favorite of mine. And we got to show a little bit love to, by all means, the biggest franchise in horror right now. That would be Terrifier. So Brutalities has brought you Terrifier. But that's just from the vampire. The devil has some favorites of his own.
Oh yeah, do you like the movie Pumpkinhead? Well, how about a little pumpkin bread for your throat holes? And like I said, with the rock and roll fans and the horror fans, Wednesday 13 fans, do you like Wednesday 13 and tea? How about a couple of those? With the Summertime Suicide and a couple other ones too. So if you like Wednesday 13 and you like the tea and you like the brutalities, go to the website.
Absolutely. And so, of course, we like to look out for those that look out for us. We love you, Fangs. We love you, Infernos. But as a courtesy from Brutalities to be bestowed on you, we have that Vampire and Devil coupon code, don't we, my friend?
Oh yeah, you want to save a little dough, little cheddar, maybe buy some more shit? Go on the line, Brutalities, type in Vampire and Devil, and you get 10% off your order. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. So it's getting into the chilly weather. People need to warm their bones. They need to warm what little skin they may or may not have. But Brutalities is the way to get it done. So that's the way it's going to be, because Vampire and Devil said so. Horns up, fangs out for Brutalities. Fangs and Infernos, what do you guys do on your spare time? Do you kill? Do you sleep? Do you hang upside down? Do you flutter? Do you set things on fire? Or do you play video games? Devil, my friend, I think we might have to talk about the latter in that question when it comes to the Fangs and Infernos, as we get to have a little fun, talk about some extracurricular activities, and talk a little bit about some electronics, a little video game action there, my friend.
Oh yeah, who doesn't like to, kick back after a long day of dealing with the boss yelling down your ear, then to go and, play some shoot 'em up games, or maybe, kill some zombies, or, play some some wartime stuff, or who knows what, whatever floats your boat. Maybe you like being monsters and beating up buildings and eating people from the buildings and stuff like that. I don't know. Whatever you like, you float your boat. We're not going to tell you any of those names, because we'll probably, even though we are still, not a major horror podcast, some of those companies might be like, "Hey, man, you can't say my name without being paid." So we're just gonna say video games in general. And like I said, who doesn't like a little bit of killer video games? And in this instinct, what about games that are gonna kill you
Yes.
instead of you killing them? And that's what we're gonna talk about. A little bit of fun on this one. We got some people that we've talked to before, some people that we've seen before, some people that we haven't before, and all things old and all things new. But yeah, it's gonna be a good one. A little bit of bringing the Cenobites to the screen, and maybe a little bit of trickster action too while we're at it.
Absolutely, for sure. I mean, we love us some Pinhead and we love us some Trickster, and we've been fortunate to talk to Edward Furlong a couple of times in within the last year, and get him to sign something outside of this conversation, but add a signature to our V&D alumni and family section with our beloved Shelley Duvall and the Forest Hills family. But anyway, yes, we are going to have a little bit of fun when it comes to this one as we talk video game horror, as we put up Hellraiser Hellworld up against Brainscan. And this is a very, very interesting thing. Now, first and foremost, there, Fangs and Infernos, I do want to precurse this conversation with this. I, being a big Hellraiser fan and a big fan of the franchise, yes. However, I am well aware of the somewhat downward turn that the franchise takes, however you want to look at it. Here's the thing. I like Hellraiser Hellworld quite a bit. It's, my own personal opinion. When it gets to the obituaries, we'll cover it as I see fit. But I'm well aware, as you guys are already probably like, oh God, aware of the kind of the downturn that most extended horror franchises hit, and Hellraiser was no different. I do think that there's a little bit of gem when it comes to Hellworld. There's some weird parts about interspliced that does feel a little bit like they you know, kind of threw Doug in there. But overall, I think it's strong enough in the sadness that some of the movies had, to stand on its own. As opposed to Brainscan, which is a standalone movie. It's solid. It's a classic if you're into that kind of like feel to it. And I mean, Edward Furlong's great. Trickster's a awesomely cool, like crazy villainous character, you know. So I still think this is going to be an overall interesting one, as we pit a franchise movie up against a standalone movie. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But when it does come to the Hellraiser Hellworld, it's interesting, man, because I feel like Devil, when it came to this one, it's like a little touch of, you know, trying to grab a bit of that success that the Matrix left behind, mixed with trying to modernize something. There's something in Hellraiser Hellworld that has a bit of that Halloween Resurrection feel to it. And look, I've always been very, very upfront about my dislike, my disdain for the Halloween Resurrection movie as a movie itself for the franchise. Ironically, as of the recording of this episode, we have also just recently posted our interview with Brad Loree, who was the Michael Myers in that movie. It doesn't change my opinion of Brad whatsoever. He was a doll, he was a gem. I love talking to him, can't wait to talk to him again. And as far as him being involved in the franchise, of course, that's incredibly valuable to Mrs. Vamp. But when it came to the movie itself, taking Brad out of this equation, I don't personally fancy that movie. I think it was a cash grab for current MTV stars. And I also just couldn't vibe with the whole turning Michael Myers' house into like a reality TV show. Didn't work for me, not my jam. But when it came to Hellraiser Hellworld, I felt there was a little bit of similarity in that, simply when it came to like the modernization aspect. The idea of this character committing suicide based off his obsession with this video game, his friends kind of wondering like what drove him to this, and them going to this party based around a video game that's based off the history of the puzzle box. which is an interesting concept as well, because my initial reaction, and I liked this movie back when I saw it originally, but I still had the same kind of interesting kind of reaction to it, where I was like, for a very kind of quiet secret of people stumbling across the puzzle box to like how it's supposed to be used and what happens when you fuck around and find out. It was a very interesting thing. Like, wait, how is enough information gathered to be able to do a video game based off the history of the Cenobites and the puzzle box? It was a very, very interesting take, very, very kind of unique spin. But we also do love ourselves some Lance Hendrickson, and I loved his villainous character in this. Is this kind of like millionaire guy who designed his mansion based off old artifacts from the puzzle box, which was kind of a unique way to go. Where I guess if somebody does enough digging, learns enough about something, then you can find things like cursed artifacts or just things involved with it in general. But it's a very, very unique spin of modernizing and making available the information on something that in the beginning of the franchise was a well-kept secret.
Yeah, yeah, I thought that. Yeah, like I said, it was kind of interesting. When it came to this movie, like I said, I like the concept of it. I think it's kind of cool, like the video game thing. Yeah, I guess maybe, the lore of Hellraiser and, those kind of stuff. You basically are assuming that, Hellraiser 1, 2, 3, and however many 9,000 there were before this, were based in some kind of reality in this world, you know what I mean? So like, 'cause they're obviously playing a video game, but then again, maybe it was just maybe none of that stuff did exist, and or to an extent, and these people thought it was just a cool concept for a video game. But I always thought it was kind of neat. They knew about the Cenobites, they knew about the world, they knew about the puzzle box, and and even enough about with Hellraiser 4, with learning about like the French guy that made the puzzle box. There was even a picture in the guy's office with of the painting of the guy that
Mhm.
made the puzzle box. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, like you were saying, it's like, where did they find all this information from? So maybe in this world, in this world, that stuff had already happened. There was so, they heard, oh, did you hear about 20, 30 years ago or whatever, somebody's house was, oh, had chains and stuff like that, like all the Hellraiser stuff and things like that. So maybe I thought it was cool. But yeah, I like the concept, like going to a party and like inviting these people in the house, and it's like just like, concept of this video game, and you played this online video game and you won, and now you get to come to this midnight secret party and things like people don't know, and then it's like the whole entire time you're like not quite sure what's going on, like because like the one scene, you have the guy kind of like walking around and nobody's like answering him, nobody's talking to him, like he's really not there, and it kind of made you feel like, okay, these guys are new, because it just, Lance was like, it's your first time, and shows him around the house and stuff like that. It kind of makes you go, well, okay, maybe is everybody there ghosts then, or like were they already, they've already come to this party before and they've been killed, or it's kind of really confusing. Again, it's like you said, they're the capitalizing and like the franchise, the whole world, video gaming, movies and video games being big, things like that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, it's like one of those ones where it's like, it just, when it like, like we've talked about millions of times when it comes to the Hellraiser franchise, the first two are, are gold standard. Yeah,
Yeah.
me and you will definitely still die on the hill for Hellraiser 3. And even how, like you said, even to a point,
Awesome.
Hellraiser 4, I still think is an interesting film because I like it because it's more of the backstory about the puzzle box. So I still understand it, but it's just that every movie sequentially it got less and less and less more about Pinhead and the Hellraisers, and like to the point where he's barely in the movie for like 5 minutes. And that's like another one where it's just like, yeah, you barely had them in it. You had Chatterer for a couple seconds, and you had Pinhead for a couple seconds in this movie. It was just like, it just like I said, it just the world and the marketing and all that wants to just like just but okay, yeah, yeah, we'll just we'll have him in it for like a couple seconds, and it's like the more you watch it, you're like, Jesus, man, like come on, man, it's about Pinhead. Why would if yeah, these people open a box, but it's like, but did they open a box? I'm like they kind of did, but they opened a box in a video game, so it was like a fake world. So it's like, is this video game tied into their world and their dimensions, that even in a video game, if you open up a box, you really did open up a box. It was just, I don't know, like I said, it gets kind of confusing, but it's still pretty cool. I still like the kills in this movie. I think it's really, really cool. I think I like the concept of it. It was just that, like I said, when it comes to a Hellraiser, it's just the little bit of the Cenobites and a little bit of Pinhead being in it. It's like those are I mean, like I said, it doesn't necessarily all need to be about Pinhead. I mean, yeah, technically he is considered the leader of the Cenobites. But yeah, it's just like, into that world, it just seems like that world is like an after effect, and you're just trying to
Yeah.
work around that world.
And it's weird, Devil, because like if you look at the DVD cover of this, because being a Hellraiser guy, like I've got, physical copies of every movie. And Pinhead, Doug's face is the whole cover. He's the whole
Yeah,
poster. Like it kind of does have this, like I said, matrixy look with this kind of black and green tint to it. Um, but it's a very interesting thing. And the thing that's a little bit confusing about this is like, I mean, if you really pick it apart, it does work because having Pinhead and the Cenobites involved in this is part of, for lack of a better term, Lance Hendrickson's obsession with why he has his house set up this way and how it's designed and so on and so forth. But the funny thing about this movie is it probably would have technically been just a better movie if Lance was just the villain, like
yeah,
by himself. As he if he was this, you could have found a way to kind of be cheeky with things and maybe put little nods to the lament configuration in different places, or like maybe like with the poster, the painting of the puzzle box toy maker, maybe do something like maybe a bus that you see kind of in the background that you have to catch if you see it, of maybe Pinhead, kind of like the big tower in Hellraiser 3 where
yeah,
Pinhead's face is in it. Maybe something like that where it's not specifically a Hellraiser movie per se, but there's these little nods to where you can clearly see, like I said, that kind of fuck around and find out aspect. But Lance's unique portrayal and weirdness of this millionaire-ish party throwing mansion owning guy is kind of a unique concept in its own. And he's actually very, in my opinion, he's very strong in that role. And I liked the idea of them taking the Hellraiser concept, which has always kind of been its own standalone thing, and making almost an 80s style slasher feel around it. I actually thought that was kind of cool. And I thought that was a very interesting rabbit hole to go down. But the tricky thing is you're taking this like, this, puppeteer kind of solid villain. And then, like I had said earlier, like you're kind of just kind of splicing Pinhead in to kind of make it a Hellraiser movie. And again, I'm not mad at them for it because I do like this movie. And I think while I understand all the continuous gripes, because I have them as well when it comes to, Inferno and Hellseeker and Deader and all that. Trust me, Fangs and Infernos, I'm right there with you. But I do think that there's some hidden quality, some solid quality to this movie that, call it luck, call it a unique style of writing that does work with this, but it does have a slightly jumbly feel to it only because you're coming off the weirdness of this kind of like the director kind of Boca trilogy, where it's like, ah, fuck, his first movie, weak. His second movie, weak. This third movie, it's definitely, in my opinion, not weak, but it's, man, that's a tough sell when you've kind of fucked up twice already.
Yeah, and that's the cool thing about too and watching this movie because it being what 20 some years old or whatever when it came out. It's
Yeah.
interesting going back and watching it now because you think of okay, yeah, you got, yeah, obviously, like you said, you got Doug Bradley back as Pinhead, and you got Lance Henriksen, who's a huge horror icon, but then you also got like two actors in this movie who are super super young looking, and you got and Carrie Payton, who everybody knows as Ezekiel from Walking Dead,
Yep.
so young. But then you have a young Henry Cavill, a young Superman.
Superman.
I'm like, it's so funny watching it back and remembering, like, I forgot that he was those two were in that movie, and then just seeing how young and how like even as a lack of term of like maybe having crafted their acting ability, but it might not necessarily have been them. It's script wise; they're doing what the script said, but they just look so green and so
Yeah.
young looking, and then versus like where they are now. You know what I mean? Like Henry Cavill, like I said with Superman being huge now, so it's like I just think it's funny, but like I said, I thought the movie was interesting. I thought it was pretty cool where, you have like I said, these guys are interested in the video game and know all that stuff like that, and they go into the world. Yeah, like I said, I think it had some really cool kills. Like,
Yeah.
at one point, you're so used to seeing Pinhead. Basically, if he kills anybody, he just basically just usually sends the chains for him. And it was interesting seeing him kill somebody with a meat cleaver.
Yeah. Just
Just
fucking.
straight up chop chop, you know what I mean? It was like, wait, are they trying to make, Pinhead a slasher killer? Like, almost that kind of a feel in this movie where he's just like, killing people with normal, household gifts and things like, tools and shit like that, where like I said, usually when you see him go after anybody, he just sends the chains for him. That he's the control of the chains. And that was the one thing in this. There was no chains. There was no,
I know.
you didn't have any of that hell, that bringing that hell into him. But it was still interesting. I still liked a lot of the kills. I liked the fact that like, you know, it's very, the whole movie is sort of just a hypnotism drug infused kind of psychosis because you find out that these guys are all like buried underneath the ground in a coffin, and they basically just have like a walkie talkie or something like that where Lance's character can say certain trigger words and things like that to get these guys with this drug can make their mind see things and do things, and it was kind of interesting. I thought that was kind of cool, cool concept where it was like, yeah, basically everything you saw wasn't even real anyway. I mean, the house is real, obviously, and stuff like that, but like all the other things, it's like, okay, maybe this wasn't real. Maybe that explains why this did this, or maybe that explains why, help Pinhead use the meat cleaver instead of the chains. You know what I mean? Because it wasn't necessarily there, and yeah, it was just kind of interesting. I thought it was like okay, and then it just kind of the police would just randomly stumble and find the graves, and you're like, oh, okay, that's cool.
Yeah. And I mean, you had like the walkie-talkies as like the most indestructible cell phone ever made. So
Yeah.
the unique, almost Wayne's World-ish product placement of the Nokia phones and
Oh
stuff like
yeah,
that.
yeah. It's just like the whole entire movie was just one big subliminal marketing tool for Nokia. I mean, it was like I think we read on the notes it was like 100 and something like times you see product placing of the Nokia. Like, I gotta get my phone. My phone. It's like they made sure that like okay, we always laugh about it because if you watch like if you watch movies, I love watching movies and then, going back and watching some of the commentary for movies. And you watch like Young Guns, and it says like, I think it was like, I think like Lou Diamond Phillips and some of the smaller cast were there, and doing the commentary, and they're like, yeah, they're talking about Kiefer and Emilio and them all like perfectly like on their horses, and all of them like just being camera right there,
Yeah.
making sure that their faces lined up constantly. And they're like, yeah, like those guys definitely made sure they hit their marks every time perfectly. We're always making sure that camera, and that's what it kind of just reminded me of. It was just very like, okay, guys, whatever you do in this movie, man, we don't give a shit about you. You Carrie Payton. No one knows who you are yet. Nobody knows who Henry Cavill is yet. None of you guys don't mean shit. Yeah, we got Lance, but okay, whatever. We don't even care about Lance. We want to make sure that you make sure this phone is visible all the damn time. We want people to buy this damn phone.
Yeah, it's definitely funny like that. And the other thing too, as we go into like the obituaries, is like the ending of this movie had a weird little it had two separate weirds. One that was just weird, and the other that was like weird but kind of cool. And that was you got the survivors who are pulled out of their graves, and then the other graves you see their friends, like, each one killed by the hallucination of what it was. One like, anxiety attack, or one like suffocation, one, tore out her throat kind of because in the illusion it was kind of like a saw trap almost kind of a thing. And the one like the fingers down to the bones kind of thing. I mean, you had the survivors, then you had their friends that died, but the weird thing is, you saw the relief of them being broken out of their graves and surviving. But there's this very strange driving away scene, like a car version of like that walking away Hulk style, where they just seem to be having this pleasant, happy car ride. I'm like, are we not going to acknowledge the fact that like all your mates were dead in graves? Like,
Yeah.
you guys just seem unusually content and happy to just, it's one thing to be relieved that you're alive, but they just seemed unusually happy to be able to cruise and just drive. And then the ultimate end of the movie, which felt a little tacked on, almost like a hidden scene in the credits, but I think it worked. And I kind of dug the fact that it was just Lance Hendrickson's character getting his just desserts as fucking Pinhead just fucked him up.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's just kind of awesome. I was just kind of down for that like hidden scene in the credits that wasn't in the credits. It was just right at the end of the movie. So it did have a little bit of a tacked on feel to it, but it definitely was like, shit, that's kind of strangely designed, but fuck yeah, awesome. And a fun fact to a lot of the Fangs and Infernos who might not actually know this is Lance Hendrickson was actually tapped to be Frank in the first Hellraiser movie, and he turned it down because he was committed to Near Dark, which I appreciate and I love, but also as a Hellraiser fan, it's like, oh shit, that would have been cool, man. Like Lance as Frank, not that our regular Frank wasn't fucking bitching because he did a great job. I'm forgetting the actor's name off the top of my head. But I thought it was great portrayal anyway. Man, that would have been cool to see, Lance as Frank. But I did like the fact that it kind of came full circle and we still got Lance in the franchise, which was pretty cool. But anyway, Devil, when it comes to like when it comes to the Hellraiser Hellworld, when it comes to the obituaries, I'll keep it short and sweet. Like I enjoy it. I went into this movie way back in the day with a grain of salt, just knowing how much I was bumming out as the movies continued, but I've always been so loyal to the franchise that like I'm gonna go and see it. Revelations, the first non-Doug Bradley movie, horrible. A fucking train wreck if there ever was one. The second movie, Judgment, I don't love it, but I'll be honest, I enjoy it. They definitely did a much better job taking their time, sourcing the material, making sure that Pinhead looked proper, and that it didn't come off as just like this just chump. So the Judgment movie, I'll put up a fight that that movie's not as hard, not as bad as people are, hard on it. I think it's got some quality to it. And personally, when it comes to the Hulu version of the movie, you and I have met the Jason who played the Chowder in that movie. I actually like that movie quite a bit. Thought it was a very unique take. I thought it was a cool portrayal of the Pinhead character, and even Doug signed off on it. I love the idea of the keyhole in her throat. Thought it was very, very cool. But anyway, getting back on point. I think that Hellraiser Hellworld is a solid quality movie. I liked the modern take. I think it worked. I just think there was a little bit of split personality coming to it when it came to how they wanted to portray it. And it came off a little choppy at times and a little weak. But overall, look, I enjoy it. I think it's a pretty decent movie, despite the fact that it was set up to fail based off its predecessors. So look, I'm going to give it a 7. I think it's a solid enough movie, and I think it can be enjoyed by the majority of the common populace if you're taking Hellraiser snobism out of it, which I have more than enough reason to be very snobby when it comes to Hellraiser. I personally think I've earned that right. Um, and I do think that this movie deserves a little bit more fuck yeah than it deserves fuck you.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think prior to watching it again, I probably would have given this a way lower score than what I'm gonna give it. I would
Sure.
probably give this like movie a 3 or a 4, just because of that. But then, like you were saying, going back and rewatching it again, and then thinking of some of those other ones, like you were talking about, that came out either after this or even the ones that preceded this one that were a little bit before it. Those were just so horrible of a train wreck that you just kind of got desensitized by these
Yeah.
films, that even going in and seeing this one, probably when I did watch it the first time, I probably hated it just because I hated those other ones so bad that I kind of came into this saying, fuck this movie, I'm going to watch it anyway, but fuck this movie
And
anyway.
and rightfully so.
So yeah, so I mean, thinking about that, and like you were saying, I love, like I said, I personally don't like the newer ones that came out afterwards. I mean, other than the Hulu one, I thought the Hulu one was basically, other than 1, 2, 3, and 4. I still would put the Hulu one probably better than 4, but I'd put the Hulu one in the same contention with maybe being a little bit better than 3, but in that same ballpark of 3. I still, in that kind of range. But yeah, for this one, you know what I mean? Like I said, now rewatching it again, I didn't think it was that bad. Like I said, it wasn't as bad as I remember it being bad. Yeah,
Yeah.
there are definitely points on it where, I wish they would have had more, more of Pinhead, more of the Cenobites, more of that kind of feel to it, and it's not instead of the after fact of it. But yeah, compared to some of the other ones where it wasn't as bad, it kind of made sense why he wasn't in it as much, because of it being more of like the hallucination, and these people are doing that. So it's like, you're not exactly sure what's all real and what's not real. So, I can see it. And like I said, watching the movie, I thought I liked it a little bit better. Me going is, I definitely can't go as high as a 7,
That's cool.
because to me, like, if you know we're liking this, but we're still shitting on it. So shitting on it to a point 7, that just means that obviously part 4 is going to have to be like a 7.5. That means part 3 has got to be an 8. And you're giving 3 an 8. As much as we still love 3, it's still way too ridiculously high of a score. Even with
Yeah, I
even with
can't.
2 being an 8.5 or a 9, then you have to give Hellraiser 1 a 10. And don't get me wrong, I love Hellraiser. I just don't think it's a 10, as much as I love horror films. I'm not going to put that up there with like with movies like Rocky Horror Picture Show and The Shining, even your Near Dark. I'm not going to put them as perfect as some of those ones. So I
Valid,
think,
valid,
so I
valid
think,
point.
so I think, like I said, normally I probably would have given the score way lower than that. But I think for me, I think personally, like I said, 7, I think still a little too high for it. I'm gonna go with a 6. I think 6 is a good solid rate for it. Like I said, I would have probably given it a 4 or 3 if I hadn't rewatched it again. Like I said, normally when we do these, I like to rewatch them again just because you never know. Maybe I might find something I enjoy now that I didn't enjoy when it came out 20 years ago or something like that. So that's why I always like to revisit these films that we talk about. So that's why I'm gonna give it a 6, versus the initial probably like a 3 or a 4.
Absolutely. No, I definitely get you on that for sure. And honestly, I'll you make a very, very strong point when it comes to that. So you know what? Normally we meet in the middle, but you really do have pose a great argument when you compare it to the other movies in the franchise that we really like. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go with that 6 when it comes to Hellraiser Hellworld because the points are valid, everything makes sense, and that's the way it's gonna be. So when it comes to you guys, Fangs and Infernos, that's the way it's gonna be. When it comes to Hellraiser Hellworld, in this part of the showdown, we're actually going to go with a 6 as opposed to a 6.5 when it comes to Hellraiser Hellworld. So that's the way that it's going to be. Ron, give me just 1 second. Everything cool, babe? And now we get to talk a little bit about the Devil's Pick. Again, like we had talked about before, we do love ourselves some Edward Furlong, and man, I do love this trickster character. So it's going to be a whole lot of fun to talk about it when it comes to this because it's definitely a very unique concept. So, Devil, my friend, let's talk a little bit about Brainscan.
Yeah, I've always been a huge fan of this movie. It didn't do very well in the box office and stuff like that. So hence the reason why a lot of people didn't really know much about it. But it definitely had a huge, started getting a huge cult following. And like I said, I've always been. It's at that same time, Edward Furlong. He's. I think at the time he was like 16, so it's in that ballpark of him doing the Terminator films and things like that in that area. But yeah, I mean, it's yeah, like you said, you got Edward Furlong in it. You got Franklin Agella on it. I always say that guy's name wrong, but all the time. But anyway,
Skeletor.
Skeletor. Oh, yeah, that's what I always call him. Obviously, he was in it. But I always thought this was a cool movie. I always thought it was just a cool concept. And like you were saying, the guy who plays the trickster is just he's one of those characters that I think if this movie would have gotten maybe a bigger not really necessarily budget, but would have gotten a bigger break when it came out. I think Trickster would have been on there as an iconic character that people would be cosplaying, people would want to do, and he would have became like maybe a staple in the realm of the world and stuff like that. Because I thought he was just a cool concept looking character, you know he's got good taste in music. He throws in a little bit of Primus in there for you. And,
Yeah.
I was like, hell yeah, man. But like I said, I always thought this was a cool concept of a movie. You got these kids who are like, you know, saturated with, horror films and, horror music and all that kind of stuff. They're all video gamers and, they're reading in their Fangoria magazines about stuff. And his best friend's like, hey, man, did you hear about this new game, Brainscan? Yeah, it's supposed to be terrifying. He's like, yeah, that's what the last video game was supposed to be. And it was kind of boring and things like that. You know what I mean? So they all got that. They got their little movie club and stuff like that, and the principal doesn't like the fact that it's playing it, and he's like, "What was this horrible movie that you were watching?" He was like, "Death, death, death." And the guy's like, "Death, death, death, part two."
I thought that
so,
was awesome.
so it's like, yeah, so they're just like saturated in this world. Obviously there's a little bit of backstory. They show periodically throughout it that he was involved into a huge car accident that killed his mother and messed up his knee really really bad. So he's got a little bit of psyche. His dad is always we don't know exactly what his dad does, but I'm assuming his dad does something in tech and does something with money because he's got like he's living in a nice big huge house. He's got state of the art video gaming. I mean, even that video gaming chair that he has is like at that time was like nobody had anything like super crazy like that. So being able to do this, but yeah, they find
He's
about
got
this
like
game.
Siri. He's got like Siri before there's Siri. He can just
Yeah,
talk out loud and have his phone dialed.
yeah, he got this, the Igor guy that's kind of like just like like artificial intelligence, like you said, sort of before it was even big and stuff like that, and nobody knew what it was. But I thought it was cool, that he goes and tries this video game, and he's like, well, what's gonna do? And it kind of just, shocks him a little bit, gets into his psyche, and figures out what kind of game it comes to him. He's like, I didn't even order it, but I'm gonna play it anyway. And he pops it in, and he goes around and he kills a dude and chops off his foot. And he's like, oh yeah, this was pretty intense, man. He's like, oh man, he wakes up. He's like, this was crazy. Then all of a sudden, sees that, the cops are next door and stuff like that. He's like, "Oh, what the hell is what?" And oh yeah, you didn't hear about this guy getting killed? Like, oh man, that's crazy. Then goes into his refrigerator, freezer, and sees the foot, and he's like, "Wait, what I did was real." Like, and I just love that concept of like this video game kind of immerses you. It brings you into the video game, and you start becoming, you know, everything that you do in this video game is your own actions, and the horrific stuff you do, and even the trickster the whole entire time. He was like, You did it, like."
Yeah.
You're the one that killed him, like, yeah, but that's thought it was just a video game. He's like, I don't know. He's like, now you gotta, I gotta play disc two because disc two you forgot something. And now you play this one because there's a witness. And I just think it's cool. Like, even though he keeps on playing this game, and like he said, it's not that no one's forcing him to play this game. He just keeps on going. Okay, maybe I'll fix this and fix that. And every time he keeps going further and further in this, he just makes it worse for himself.
It's like this butterfly effect type idea.
Yeah,
Where it's like, he could have just left it as is, where it's like, this guy's dead. But then he's like, kind of entices him. Trickster kind of entices him with the whole, like, you left a witness, when I don't think it really was a matter of him really leaving a witness. To be honest, in
yeah,
my opinion, if Edward had just gone about his business after that, because that was part of the whole thing, is like, if you go into the second, it's kind of like Jumanji. Once you start, you gotta finish it. But again, I think it's a little bit of sign of the times. I do think there's a small little bit of plot holes when it comes to this, because you saw the relationship with the with the witness, which happened to be his best friend, um, after the murder, and nothing had really changed. His best friend wasn't acting any weird way towards him. He just, he was just so enthusiastic about trying to get the club back together. But of course, with Edward being all stressed out and stuff, it's what led to the fight, where he's like, dude, like, I don't give a fuck, like, fuck off, like, stop, I don't care. Um, but then, that also leads a little bit of that friction too when it comes to like the potential love interest and stuff like that. And that's kind of the thing where it's like, if he had just let sleeping dogs lie and never put in the second game, I think everything just kind of falls flat. Because, yeah, he killed this guy and cut off his foot, but nothing linked him to it. Even when he was riding his bike and ran into the officers at the crime scene, they basically were just like, hey, this is a crime scene. Go home and do your homework. So it's like, not necessarily a continuity error and not necessarily a plot hole. But again, it's something that you kind of can't help but rattle around in your brain as a secondary situation versus what, of course, takes the movie on and forward. But I mean, each disc still gets you more part of the story, because you've got the second disc, which is dedicated to, specifically more to his best friend. You've got, the third movie where you start to like really get into the love interest kind of aspect. And then, then you've got the fourth part, the finale, where it's like, hey, can you cover your tracks? Where it's like, look, I'm not going to kill anybody, but you kind of did, but it wasn't your fault. Now, can you get away? So it's a very, very interesting, oh, what a tangled web we weave when we practice to deceive kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I thought it was just cool, and I love the like I said, I love the fact that that he's playing this game, he's doing all this stuff like that, and like you said, he's still trying to cope in the real world and things like that. Where it's like, like I said, a lot of that, like you were saying, a lot of the weirdness and the continuity and the plot holes kind of does make sense because when theoretically when you see it, you're kind of like, okay, yeah, he had a fight with his friend, but would his friend really turn his back on him?
Yeah.
No, no, maybe not. And it's like, okay, maybe there was some clues left at the crime scene, but would that still linked him to it? Maybe not. And then it's like, okay, then you doing that. Now the girlfriend's, love interest sees you coming home that, when you're cleaning up your evidence. And now that could be a possibility of her saying something. Would she have said something? Probably not, you know what I mean? But it's one of those ones where it's like, with that trickster, with that evil side of him, he's kind of like that devil on your shoulder, devil, and God on your right one side, the angel and the devil on the side, and he's kind of like edging him the whole entire time, like, hey, you never know, and it just, he gets him to the point where it's like, okay, yeah, maybe I got to do this. Okay, now I got to do this, and like you said, that even with the plot holes and things like you said, you're like kind of like, okay, wait, it doesn't kind of make sense. Why would this happen? That or like like even like when the cops coming into his house and he's like, because he burnt his clothes and he went and get it analyzed and they were like, oh yeah, there was definitely blood on it. How would there be blood on clothes that were burnt in ashes? Ashes isn't gonna have any traces of blood on it. So
Right.
it's just yeah, it's just weird things like that, and you're kind of like the whole entire time you're kind of like, okay, this doesn't kind of make any sense, or okay, this is kind of weird, and you're just like kind of bringing it in. But then, like I said, then whenever you go and you get to the end of the movie, he kind of wakes, he plays the video game, comes down, boom, goes, he kills the girlfriend, the girl love interest, and then the cop comes in and sees him and shoots him and does stuff like that. And he wakes up and he realizes that he's still on that first day when he, right before he played the first day when he played the first game, he realizes like, oh shit, wait, none of this stuff was real. This was all the video game that you were playing was all just one disc. It was continually. So every day before, after that, was all just in the mind of this playing this one game. So that's what made sense with all the plot holes and all the dumb stuff because it's like none of that stuff really even existed. So, you go and you find out, like I said, you find out that it's all that. He sees his buddy come, his buddy comes to his house and he's like, oh man, I missed you. I love you. And the dude's like weird. And then he goes to he goes to the love interest and goes to the party and tries to go with her. But then she's kind of like, oh, maybe we'll try. But then you see that she actually still was watching him the whole time. So some of the stuff that you saw in this video game world was stuff that was actually really happening in the real world with like her interest and things like that. And then, like I said, then it gets to the end, I love the ending. I think the ending is the funniest part in the world where it's like,
So it is.
you have the teacher that's being an asshole about the death club. He's like, hey, I want to, submit this into submission so I can show my students this. But he said, anything you want to, you want to do, I gotta watch it and portray. So now you're realizing, oh shit, now this guy is gonna go through that same kind of shit scenario, and then lo and behold, you see the dog running at the end with the foot in its mouth again, like just like the dog did with the foot in the mouth during Edwards. So you're like, oh shit, the teacher did play the game. Now he's in that world of shit right now. So I thought that was a cool ending, and I thought it was a cool movie overall. I thought,
Yeah.
like I said, I love the aesthetic of it. It's very very like that cyberpunk kind of feel to it. It definitely had that like that underground rock and roll. Very much like like I said, very trick or treat kind of feeling and like old school trick or treat, like
Yeah.
the Gene Simmons Ozzy trick or treat, very
Yes.
feel of
Sammy
that.
Kerr.
Yeah, yeah, those, definitely had that more of a feel kind of to it. And like I said, I thought it was a, overall it was just a cool movie. I love the concept of it. I love it, like, like what would you do if you're, while you're playing a game, if you're going around, because everybody plays these violent games and stuff like that, but what would you do if these violent games are supposedly true and everything you just did was real? What would you go and continue on with your tracks, or would you say after the first disc, fuck it, I'm not gonna do anymore.
No, 100% for sure. And I love the end of the movie with Trickster just chilling in the principal's chair, like just super duper, like just, you know, misery loves company, very just like his name, just very sinister and kooky and practical joke style. So I thought it was great when it came to that. I love it as a standalone movie. Frankly, I'm glad it stayed as a standalone movie. Um, if they had been able to do a follow-up, I wouldn't have hated it. I would have preferred that they had found a way to make it happen within 5 years of the original as opposed to circling back now. Because also, I think that, T's portrayal of Trickster is like so good that, like, I'd still love him to get recast if they were to do that as a modern thing. But again, very similar to Beetlejuice, with the Maitlands, like their prosthetics can do a lot, but they can't do everything. So
Yeah.
I would have loved for if they were to consider a brain scan too within 5 years, so by the late 90s, at best, I think that would have been kind of cool. But Devil, I definitely dig it as a standalone movie. And overall, I'm glad that it is one, man. So how do you look at it on the obituaries?
Oh yeah, I mean, like when it comes to the obituaries, and even like the continuation of the conversation with it being a sequel, I think the main reason why people will go, "Oh man, I can't believe they didn't get a sequel," is because with it, like you said, within that 5 year range, this movie was still a flop.
Yes.
It was years later that people started finding this film and started kind of get this cult following. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those ones like, yeah, that ship has already sailed. I mean, it'd be cool. Maybe, I mean, you could do something, but it would be, it's like the Jumanji, they came, it's like, so many years later, yeah, you can make it and make it kind of cool, but it still doesn't have that feel that the original one had. And I kind of feel like that would have been the same scenario of this one. Like you would have gotten somebody else to probably play a trickster type character. Maybe it would have been like, somebody finds that video game buried or something like that and undugs it like 20, 30 years later. But then again, you got to worry about, are people able to even use that disc anymore? Because, now it's like with video gaming systems, updating all the time. It's like, it's like, finding an old Atari game and finding somebody that has an old Atari system. You know what I mean? Yeah,
Is
they
this
have the
old like
they have the rebooted.
CD-ROM
Yeah,
even gonna work?
even like a floppy disk and stuff like that. You give a kid a floppy disk now, and they're like, "What the hell is this?" Like they don't know. So it's like, again, the technology. It would have been better with a shorter, but being, like I said, being the fact that it didn't really get that cult following until like, later on in the 2000s, in the mid 2000s, and by that time, like I said, yeah, you could have updated it maybe, but still, I don't think it would have had its charm. But yeah, overall in a movie, I always, when it comes to like video game horror, there are always two movies that I always think about mainly when it comes to this, in this kind of a of realm where we're talking about not necessarily games based off of video games like Silent Hill and
Yeah.
those kind of ones, but like the criteria was a movie where that people are playing video games. It's a video game that's trying to kill you, or trying to hurt you, or anything like that. The main two I always think about is this movie and Full Moon's Arcade. I
Yeah.
love Arcade. I think that's a cool movie too, where you're kind of getting sucked into the video games. Very, very kind of similar, but not completely similar. But those are the two. So I mean, for me, when it comes to rating this, I'm not gonna rate this movie some super high hard marks. Like I said, I love the movie. It's a fun
Same.
movie. It's a movie that I'll watch I can I mean, I may not watch it a million times in a year, but I could watch it a million times in a year. I always find it fun. Once in a while, I'll go back. I still, whenever I listen to Primus and I hear Welcome to the World," I still think of Trickster all the time. So every time I hear Primus, I'm like, "Oh man!" I just think that it would have been cool if they would have had maybe maybe a couple other Primus songs throughout the film. But anyway, I mean, it's cool. I mean, you obviously you could see he's got all the cool horror movie posters in his
Yep.
room, and I just love the decor. And those kids were seemed like especially the two main guys, Edward and his best friends, seemed like guys that I would be hanging out in my high school, like
Yes.
just friends that we hung out listening to weird crazy 80s 90s weird metal, and playing weird video games and like Resident Evil and things like that, and watching old school 70s horror films, or we're gonna watch Death Part 2 and
Part
things.
two.
Part 2, things like that. So it's like, yeah, and even the teacher thing, I mean, I bring that back. I mean, I remember a teacher telling us, go to a website, I want you to write down a website that you go and you frequent, and I want to learn more about you and learn about your personality. And of course, like, I gave him goregallery.com. And for all your old school horror fangs that know Gore Gallery is, for you young ones, you used to go on a website called, you go www.goregallery.com, and you would see photos of people that have shot themselves in the head or cut their heads, or it's all death and gore and grime. And before you found out about all the faces of death, that most of that shit was fake. This stuff was actually real photographs from real crime scenes and real things. And the teacher was like, "What the hell did you send me to? That was the most disturbing thing I've ever seen in my life." I'm like, "Well, you told me to tell you what I'm into. This is what I'm into. I could give you some scat stuff." But he was like, "What?" And he was like, "No, no." But but anyway, like I said, so
Thin
to
and
me,
skin.
yeah, yeah. So to me, it's like, I always have a soft spot for this film. But like you said, I mean, I'm not, same way when we were judging, Hellraiser, giving it, certain antics. Like I said, in my heart, I'd love to give this movie like an 8 or a 9, because
Yeah.
I just think it's a fun movie. But then again, like I said, if I give it an 8, then it's hard to justify anything that's bigger than an
Yeah.
8 going. So for me, I think a good solid 7 is good for this film.
Nah, sounds good to me, Devil. I'm definitely with you on there because it's a cool concept. It's well executed. I understand why it didn't work then, but I definitely understand and am grateful for what it's affirmed now and what it's gotten to achieve now. In fact, actually, when you and I saw Edward Furlong not that long ago at a recent con, there was a guy who brought a big whole brain scan poster for that dude to sign.
Yep.
I was, I would love to get him on my brain scanned DVD, and maybe somewhere down the line I'll consider it. But Edward's a not ridiculous, but a touch pricey, and I've gotten him 3 times. So like, it's like, yeah, do I need to keep like racking up my bill on Edward Furlong autographs? But it's a great movie. It's just fun. It's flirty. It is what it is. But again, you do make an excellent point when it comes to like how we score movies that we know to be untouchable. Killer Clowns from Outer Space, which we've already talked about, but also movies, like the original Hellraiser, Rocky Horror Picture Show. It's not horror, but a movie that I'm very fond of, and a movie like A Clockwork Orange, like things like that. So it definitely is about like keeping things, solid. So 7, I think, is a great score for it. Again, it's solid. A sequel would have been interesting. It just would have been about the timing because, of course, the studios most likely would have been way too financially scared to even take a chance on it. Because it's also kind of funny, Devil, because you take a movie like Scanners, which we've talked about in a previous showdown, and it's a great movie. That movie's got 2 sequels that most people don't even know about. There's a
Yeah.
Scanners 2 and a Scanners 3. And most people, which I do not blame them whatsoever, are not even aware of those movies being in existence, which is probably best that
Yeah.
they are just not aware of those to keep Scanners, the original Scanners, as strong as it is, because I do think that was a very quality movie. But yes, absolutely. So that's the way it's going to be, Fangs and Infernos. victory to the devil on video game horror, as with a 7.0, Brainscan is going to take out Hellraiser Hellworld at a 6.0. So it's going to get a nice solid victory there by a point of a 7-6 in favor of Brainscan. So that's the way forever and now it shall be. We appreciate you, Fangs and Infernos. You guys rock. Make sure that if you like to look oh so devilishly sophisticated, that you're seeing our friends at Rockin' Horror Apparel, who did this t-shirt. Our friends Mark and Lizzie take care of all of the Vampire and Devil merchandise exclusively. So go to rocknhorror.com, click on the Vampire and Devil collab category, and you'll see all of the stuff that we offer for merchandise. When it comes to getting into the chillier weather, it is Halloween season. You know, everybody loves and everybody should understand that this is my brutality. This is the devil's brutality, and our friends at Brutalities have all kinds of amazing flavors. Definitely go and check them out. Please support small independent museums like our friend John with the Salem Witchboard Museum and the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore. And again, because it is spooky season, please make sure that you're getting out there to support our friends at Twisted Vines, who specialize in masks as well as overall fantastic creepy decor. So we will be back together and we will hang out very, very soon there, Fangs and Infernos. Again, victory to the devil on video game horror with Brainscan taking out Hellraiser Hellworld. Horns up. Fangs out.
Devil, my friend, I think we should have a little quick conversation about everybody's respectful celestial abodes, where it be my little coffin, where I lay my head at night, or at times that you feel that you just want to go back down to make sure that hell's not getting out of whack while you are away. Let's talk about it. Vampire and Devil's newest partnership in Twisted Vines, our dear friends, Chris and Sarah and Cadaver.
Oh yeah, you like scary stuff, you like horror decor, come and check out Twisted Vines. They make all the kind of cool shit, all for your house, all kinds of scary shit. They love it. You like to bring back the horror, you want to scare your neighbors, you want to conjure up a friend to talk to, you want to conjure up somebody bad, you want to do some bad stuff to them, you go to Twisted Vines and get some of their merch.
Absolutely, for sure. Everything is completely handmade by them. So if you need a little friend, maybe a round set abode, maybe you want to conduct a little evil towards a friend that was a friend, maybe no longer a friend. They have voodoo dolls they can do for you to allow for such activities. But you know how much we love our Ouija boards, my friend, and they make all of those by hand. They took care of your beloved vampire with a nice Nosferatu board, but the devil, he happens to be a Munsters fan. And not only do they do boards as traditional rectangles, but they can put a little bit of coffin flair in them.
Oh yeah, look at that coffin shape monster board. Yeah, you wanna conjure up Mr. Herman? You wanna ask him how Pet Cemetery was? You can do it on this board. Oh yeah.
Absolutely, my friend. So again, thank you so much to Twisted Vines for partnering with the Vampire and Devil podcast, and make sure that you, Fangs and Infernos, are checking them out on their Facebook page, on their Instagram pages, and making sure that you are checking them out as they move around the country, showing their craft off at all of the various horror cons and oddities expos that they love to do. So absolutely, my friend, of course, man, horns up, fangs out for our friends at Twisted Vines.
Oh yeah.
All right there, Fangs and Infernos. Let's have a little conversation about a brand new Coffin Nails and talk about this stupid-ass movie from 2024, Suckers. Now, I'm standing where I'm standing for a particular reason, because the one thing I took away from this movie that I could actually enjoy is deaths of a bunch of just stupid influencers. Like I've always said for many, many years, stop making stupid people famous. So die, influencers, die. But at least that movie is good. Look, when it comes to Suckers, the fact of the matter is it's basically a bunch of influencers who got like invited to this like Hollywood party by a vengeful vampire who was basically screwed over by the influencers. You know, she wasn't popular and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, they always made fun of her and whatnot. And then she just kind of goes on her vengeful way of like setting up this party for all these just brain dead influencers to just come in bragging about how many followers they have, what they're going to do, how they're going to do it, why they're so popular, and why they don't suck at life. No pun intended, maybe pun intended. But look, The kills are below average. It's a mediocre cast. The acting isn't that great, and it just kind of is what it is. The funny thing about it is I did a little research on this movie, and apparently this movie had like a $3 million budget. And the fact of the matter is, where the fuck did all the money go? Well, look, it just is what it is. What can I expect from a vampire that's literally played by a porn star? And I'm not saying that to discredit anybody who's specifically in that business, but the fact of the matter is these like hyper-sexualized vampire movies that tend to star those kind of people always tend to be a little bit below par. That's just the bottom line. That's just the way it is. So when it comes to this movie, the fact of the matter is I made it all the way through, and the fact of the matter is some influencers died, but not all of them died. So as much as I'd really like to go a bit higher because of the death of influencers, some of these idiots survived, and that really just shouldn't be a thing. So fuck them. 3.5. 2024's suckers.
Ghouls and Fangs, Vampire and the Devil here. We got a little question for you. Devil, there's kind of a triangle, a three-headed monster per se, when it comes to Baltimore, that I don't think people necessarily realize. We've got Edgar Allan Poe, we've got John Waters, but what else do we have?
We got the Ouija boards, oh yeah.
Absolutely. Starting in Baltimore way back in the day, a lot of people are unfamiliar with William Fuld and Elijah Bond, who patented, and the birth of the Ouija board was right here in Baltimore. Devil and Vampire coming at you from the Witchboard Museum of Baltimore, courtesy of our friend John Kozik, who invited us out to check it out and shoot a little conversation action to let you guys all know. Of course, you've seen on our socials that we have partnered with both museums, and we couldn't be more appreciative to John for that opportunity. So whenever you're here in Baltimore, of course, right attached to the Bazaar Oddity Shop off of the Avenue, you have Witchboard Museum Baltimore. And when you're in Witch City, USA, up in Salem, Massachusetts, that's when you get to visit the Salem Witchboard Museum.
Oh yeah, if you want to see some cool stuff, see some cool boards, get some cool history, go see our boy John. Man, that guy is really awesome, man. That dude knows his boards, he knows his history, he's about preserving the society of witch boards and the talking boards and all that goodness. And, you know, we love it. We love the fact that, you know, they were going to bring in this museum here in Baltimore, so all the Baltimore fans or all your East Coast fans or maybe not as far away, going up to Salem, come out to Baltimore and check it out, you know what I mean? Because there's some cool stuff in this museum, and you gotta check it out, because the devil and the vampire said so.
That is facts right there, my friend. Again, absolutely attached to the Bazaar Oddities shop in the Avenue in Hamden for the Baltimore established Witchboard Museum, or off of Essex Street in Salem, Massachusetts for the Salem Witchboard Museum. Horns up, fangs out.